How many times have you felt the sting of rejection, that moment when your job application disappears into the void, when someone you care about turns away, or when an opportunity slips through your fingers? It's a universal experience, one that can leave even the strongest among us feeling defeated. But what if I told you that rejection isn't the end of the story? In fact, it could be the beginning of something far greater, if you know how to wield it. Today, we're diving into the ancient wisdom of Stoicism, a philosophy forged in the fires of adversity, to uncover 20 powerful strategies for navigating rejection with unshakable strength and unwavering dignity. Picture Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled an empire but still faced betrayal and hardship, or Seneca, the philosopher who endured exile and political turmoil, yet emerged with his spirit intact. These weren't just thinkers, they were warriors of the mind, and their insights are just as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. Stoicism teaches us that rejection isn't a verdict on our worth. It's an invitation to grow, to refine our character, and to rise above circumstances with grace. Whether you're dealing with a broken heart, a career setback, or simply the everyday friction of life, these timeless principles can transform how you respond. This video isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending rejection doesn't hurt. It's about reclaiming your power. Over the next 20 strategies, we'll explore how to reframe setbacks as stepping stones, how to cultivate inner resilience that no external event can shake, and how to walk away from rejection with your head held high. Imagine a version of yourself who doesn't crumble under criticism, but uses it as fuel, who doesn't fear no, but sees it as a redirection to something better. That's the journey we're embarking on together. So if you're ready to turn rejection from a source of pain into a source of strength, let's begin. The first and most powerful Stoic strategy for facing rejection is understanding what's truly within your control and what isn't. The ancient teacher Epictetus, born a slave and no stranger to hardship, put it bluntly: some things are up to us and some are not. Think about that for a moment. When you're rejected, whether it's a job, a relationship, or an opportunity, how much of that outcome was actually yours to decide? The answer might surprise you. Here's the Stoic truth: you rarely control the outcome, but you always control your response. The hiring manager's choice, another person's feelings, even the timing of opportunities. These are external events swirling around you like weather. You can't command the wind, but you can adjust your sails. What is yours to command? Your effort, your attitude, how you prepare, how you rebound, and most importantly, the meaning you assign to the experience. That's where your power lies. Try this exercise the next time rejection stings. Grab a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. On one side, list everything about the situation that was outside your control: the other person's decision, market conditions, even plain old bad luck. On the other side, write what you could influence: your preparation, your persistence, whether you learned from feedback, how you treated others in the process. See the difference? The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, and it's your secret weapon. When you focus only on your side of the line, rejection loses its power to define you. Consider Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome during plagues and wars, facing betrayals that could have crushed him. Instead, he wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. That's the shift. Rejection isn't personal when you stop tying your worth to uncontrollable outcomes. So here's a question to carry with you. The last time you faced rejection, how much of it was truly yours to change? And what would happen if you poured that same energy into what you can control? Now let's talk about the second Stoic strategy: reframing rejection not as a failure but as feedback. The Stoics had a powerful concept called amor fati, which translates to love of fate. It's the practice of embracing everything life throws at you, not just enduring it, but seeing it as necessary, even beneficial. Think about that for a moment. What if every rejection wasn't a door slamming shut, but a signpost pointing you in a better direction? Take Thomas Edison, who famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's amor fati in action. Each rejection, each setback was feedback, a lesson that refined his approach until he reached success. The Stoics would argue that rejection works the same way. That job you didn't get, maybe it saved you from a toxic workplace, that relationship that ended. It might have freed you to meet someone truly aligned with your values. Even the most painful no can contain hidden wisdom, if you're willing to look for it. Marcus Aurelius put it this way: the obstacle is the way. In other words, what stands in your path becomes the path. Imagine a modern entrepreneur whose first startup collapses. Instead of seeing it as a defeat, they analyze what went wrong. Maybe the timing was off, or the product didn't solve a real problem. That feedback becomes the foundation for their next venture, which thrives because of the lessons learned. Rejection isn't the opposite of success, it's part of the process. So here's a challenge for you. The next time you face rejection, ask yourself, how might this serve me in the long run? Could it be steering you away from something that wasn't right? Is it revealing a skill you need to develop, or is it simply teaching you resilience? When you start seeing rejection as feedback, it loses its power to discourage you and becomes a tool for growth. After all, the Stoics didn't just tolerate adversity, they used it, and so can you. The third Stoic strategy might sound counterintuitive at first. It's called Premeditatio Malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This isn't about pessimism, it's about inoculation. Think of it like this: when you imagine the worst-case scenario before it happens, you rob it of its power to shock or devastate you. Seneca, who faced exile and constant political danger, wrote extensively about this practice. He said, "What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect." Rehearse them in your mind: exile, torture, war, shipwreck. Now he wasn't advocating for dwelling on misery, he was teaching resilience. By mentally preparing for life's harshest blows, we ensure they never catch us off guard. Let's apply this to rejection. Imagine you've poured your heart into a project and it gets rejected. Instead of avoiding that thought, lean into it. Ask yourself, what would I do if this fell apart? Picture the scenario in vivid detail: the initial disappointment, the practical steps you'd take next, even the unexpected opportunities that might arise from the setback. This isn't inviting failure, it's dismantling fear. When rejection comes, and it will, you'll meet it with calm clarity because you've already walked through the fire in your mind. Here's a journaling exercise Seneca might approve of. Write down your biggest professional or personal fear, the rejection that keeps you up at night. Then outline 3 specific actions you'd take to rebuild afterward. Maybe it's reaching out to your network, refining your skills, or simply giving yourself time to reflect. The key is to move beyond what if and into here's how. That shift transforms anxiety into agency. Consider how athletes use visualization. A gymnast doesn't just practice perfect routines, she rehearses stumbling and recovering mid-air. When it happens in competition, her body reacts instinctively because she's trained for it. Rejection is no different. By confronting it in advance, you build emotional muscle memory. Seneca put it best: the man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. So next time you're tempted to avoid thinking about rejection, try this instead: stare it down. Plan your response, and watch how much smaller it seems when you're prepared. The fourth Stoic strategy cuts straight to the heart of why rejection stings so deeply: our dependence on external validation. Think about how much of your daily energy goes into seeking approval, worrying what others think, craving likes, measuring success by applause or promotions. Now imagine Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's greatest Stoic teachers, observing our modern obsession with followers and feedback. He'd likely say we've built our self-worth on quicksand. His radical alternative, self-sufficiency, the unshakable understanding that your value doesn't fluctuate with others' opinions. Here's the paradox: the less you need validation, the more freely you can pursue what truly matters. Consider the artist who creates for the joy of expression rather than viral fame, or the leader who makes tough but principled decisions without polling public opinion. They embody what the Stoics called autarkeia, the ability to find contentment within yourself. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself, "It's ridiculous not to escape from your own vices, which is possible, while trying to escape the vices of others, which is impossible." In other words, you'll exhaust yourself trying to control how others perceive you, but you can master how you perceive yourself. Try this experiment. Spend one full day without seeking validation. Post nothing for likes, share no humble brags, don't fish for compliments. Notice the anxiety that arises and the liberation that follows when you realize the world doesn't end when you stop performing for it. Epictetus offered a simple test. If someone told you that others were speaking ill of you behind your back, would you rush to defend yourself? His point wasn't about ignoring slander. It was about recognizing that your character isn't defined by chatter. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to relationships or feedback. Seneca, who cherished deep friendships, still warned, to be dependent on another's opinion is to hand them the reins of your happiness. When rejection comes, ask yourself, did I fail to meet their standards or did I compromise my own? There's power in realizing you can respect others' perspectives without needing their endorsement. As the Stoic proverb goes, if you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. Translation: true wealth is aligning with your purpose, not collecting applause. So the next time you feel the pull of validation, pause. Ask, who am I without the likes, the praise, the titles? The answer might just set you free. Rejection doesn't have to break you, it can forge you. This brings us to the fifth Stoic strategy: the obstacle is the way. It's the art of using barriers as fuel, transforming setbacks into the very thing that propels you forward. Think of a blacksmith tempering steel. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The blazing fire makes flames and brightness out of everything thrown into it." That's the essence of this principle. What if every rejection wasn't a roadblock but raw material for your growth? History is full of stories where apparent failures became the foundation for greatness. Take Thomas Edison, who famously reframed his 10,000 unsuccessful attempts at the light bulb not as defeats, but as discoveries. Each rejection taught him something new: what materials didn't work, what designs failed, what adjustments were needed. Without those so-called failures, the final breakthrough wouldn't have been possible. The Stoics would argue that rejection works the same way. It's not the absence of success, it's part of its architecture. Let's bring this closer to home. Imagine you're passed over for a promotion. The easy reaction is frustration or self-doubt. But what if you asked, what skill did this reveal I need to sharpen? Maybe it exposed gaps in your leadership abilities or highlighted the importance of clearer communication. That rejection just handed you a roadmap for growth. Or consider a creative project that gets rejected. Could it be pushing you to refine your voice, to dig deeper into your craft? The Stoic practice here is simple but profound. Don't just endure the obstacle, let it reshape you. Here's a challenge. Reflect on a recent rejection and ask yourself, What did it force me to learn or improve? Did it reveal hidden resilience, teach patience? Show where your preparation fell short. Even the most painful no carries a gift, if you're willing to unwrap it. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, illness, and war, yet he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. That's the mindset shift. Rejection isn't something to avoid. It's the grit that polishes you into something stronger. So next time life says no, remember, you're not being turned away, you're being redirected and tempered. The sixth Stoic strategy reveals a crucial distinction between numbness and true resilience. Ancient philosophers called it apathy, a term often misunderstood as emotionless detachment. But here's the reality. Stoicism isn't about suppressing feelings, it's about achieving calm clarity through them. Picture a lake after a storm. The waves don't vanish instantly, but gradually the surface stills until it reflects the sky again. That's the Stoic ideal, not denying the storm of rejection, but learning to navigate it without being capsized. Epictetus, who taught students in a philosophy school after gaining his freedom, used the metaphor of an archer to illustrate this. A skilled archer focuses on drawing the bow perfectly, aiming true, and releasing with precision. But once the arrow leaves the string, even the best archer can't control whether it hits the target. Wind might deflect it, a moving target might dodge. The lesson: pour your energy into what you can influence, your effort, your preparation, and release attachment to outcomes. When rejection comes, it's not a commentary on your worth. It's simply the wind diverting an arrow. The archer's job isn't to rage against the breeze, but to adjust and shoot again. This is where the Stoic pause becomes your superpower. Between the sting of rejection and your reaction, there's a sliver of space, a breath where choice lives. Seneca described it as the gap where reason intervenes. Imagine receiving harsh criticism. Your pulse races, heat rises, that's natural. But instead of lashing out or crumbling, you step into that pause. One deep inhale, this hurts, but it doesn't define me. One exhale, what can I learn here? That momentary space is where emotional alchemy happens. Try this breathing exercise the next time rejection strikes. Inhale for 4 counts, imagining clarity filling your lungs. Hold for 4, acknowledging the emotion without letting it steer. Exhale for 6, releasing the need to control what's already passed. Repeat until the initial wave settles. It's not about erasing discomfort. It's about creating room to respond instead of react. Marcus Aurelius faced constant political betrayals, yet he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. That's the heart of apathy, not an absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. So when rejection lands, ask yourself, am I letting this moment control me, or am I choosing how it shapes me? The difference between those two questions is where resilience is born. Let's turn to the 7th Stoic strategy, one practiced by emperors and slaves alike, the power of journaling. Picture Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the Roman Empire, sitting by candlelight each morning and evening, scribbling notes to himself. Those private reflections became meditations, a timeless guide to resilience. What's striking isn't just what he wrote, but why he wrote. This wasn't diary keeping for posterity. It was a daily mental cleanse, a way to process setbacks, rejections, and frustrations with clear-eyed objectivity. Here's the Stoic secret: writing forces clarity. When rejection stings, emotions swirl like storm clouds, distorting reality. But when you put pen to paper, you create space between feeling and fact. Seneca called this self-dialogue, a conversation with your wiser self. Imagine facing a crushing professional rejection. In your head, the narrative might spiral, "I'll never succeed. I'm not good enough. Now, write those thoughts down. Suddenly, they lose their grip. You see them for what they are: temporary emotions, not eternal truths. Try this 2-question template inspired by Aurelius' journals. First, what did I learn? Maybe that rejection revealed a skill gap you hadn't noticed, or perhaps it taught you how to handle criticism with grace. Second, what can I control next time? Focus on actionable insights, better preparation, clearer communication, or even just managing expectations. This isn't about self-blame, it's about reclaiming agency. Consider how athletes review game footage. They don't just wallow in defeat, they analyze missteps to improve. Journaling does the same for life's rejections. Seneca wrote, "We should every night call ourselves to account. What weakness have I mastered? What temptation resisted?" Notice the emphasis on progress, not perfection. Here's a challenge. For the next 7 days, spend 5 minutes each evening journaling through this lens. No elaborate prose, just raw, honest reflection. You might start noticing patterns. Perhaps you take rejection personally when it's truly situational, or maybe you overlook small wins in the shadow of setbacks. Aurelius' words remind us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Journaling lets you choose that color deliberately. So next time rejection leaves you reeling, reach for a pen, not a distraction. The page won't judge, it will only reflect back the strength you forgot you had. The 8th Stoic strategy flips conventional wisdom on its head. Instead of avoiding discomfort, you deliberately seek it. The Stoics called this ascesis, a practice of voluntary hardship to strengthen resilience. Picture a musician rehearsing scales until their fingers ache, or an athlete training in bad weather to prepare for any condition. This isn't punishment, it's preparation. By willingly stepping into discomfort, you inoculate yourself against life's inevitable rejections. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming a revered teacher, put it bluntly, difficulty shows what men are. In other words, you don't discover your strength by avoiding challenges, you reveal it by facing them head-on. Think about how we typically approach discomfort. We chase comfort, the perfect job, the ideal relationship, the smoothest path. But the Stoics argue that this makes us fragile. When rejection comes, it feels catastrophic because we've trained ourselves to expect only ease. Now imagine a different approach, intentionally exposing yourself to small, manageable hardships, cold showers instead of hot, a day without social media. A difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Each of these acts is like lifting weights for your resilience. When real rejection strikes, you're not caught off guard, you've already built the mental muscle to handle it. Here's a challenge inspired by Seneca, who regularly practiced poverty even as one of Rome's wealthiest men. For 1 week, do something uncomfortable every single day. It could be as simple as waking up an hour earlier, fasting until noon, or striking up a conversation with a stranger. The goal isn't to suffer needlessly, it's to prove to yourself that discomfort won't break you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Our actions may be impeded, but there can be no impeding our intentions or dispositions. By choosing discomfort, you reclaim power over your reactions." Consider how Navy SEAL train. They don't wait for actual combat to test their limits. They simulate extreme conditions in controlled environments. When real missions go sideways, their response is automatic because they've been there before. Voluntary discomfort works the same way. That job rejection, it's just another exercise in a lifelong training regimen. That romantic setback, another opportunity to practice emotional endurance. The ancient Stoics knew what modern science confirms. Exposure therapy works. The more familiar you become with discomfort, the less control it has over you. So ask yourself, where have I been avoiding discomfort, and what would happen if I leaned into it instead? Epictetus warned, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. By making discomfort your ally, you transform rejection from a threat into just another rep in your resilience workout. And with each small act of voluntary hardship, you're not just preparing for life's no's, you're proving to yourself that you can withstand far more than you think. Sometimes rejection feels like the end of the world until you look up at the night sky. That brings us to the ninth Stoic strategy, the view from above, a mental exercise that shrinks life's setbacks down to their proper size. Imagine Marcus Aurelius standing on the palace balcony at night, gazing at the stars, reminding himself, think of the substance of the whole, how small your share of it. Think of the expanse of time, how brief the slice allotted to you. That's perspective in its purest form. When rejection burns hot, this practice douses it with the cool realization. In the grand scheme, this moment is but a speck. Here's how it works. Picture yourself floating above the earth, watching your life unfold from this elevated vantage point. That job rejection, from here, it's one thread in a vast tapestry. That romantic heartbreak, a single note in a lifelong symphony. The Stoics called this cosmic insignificance, not to diminish your pain, but to liberate you from its weight. When you zoom out, you realize most rejections that feel catastrophic now will be footnotes in your story. Try this simple question next time rejection stings. Will this matter in 5 years? Not 5 months or 5 weeks, 5 years. If the answer is no, grant yourself permission to feel the disappointment, then release its grip. If the answer is yes, ask, what can I learn that will serve me for those 5 years? Either way, you've transformed rejection from a crisis into context. For a visceral experience of this perspective, step outside tonight and look at the stars. The light hitting your eyes traveled millions of years to reach you. That person who ghosted you, that project that got cancelled, they exist in a fraction of that timeline. Seneca wrote letters to his friend Lucilius about watching the sunset over the Mediterranean, noting how petty human conflicts seemed against nature's grandeur. Meditation can amplify this effect. Sit quietly and imagine your life as a single frame in a film reel stretching centuries. Your rejections become data points, not defining moments but course corrections. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing, "Many of the anxieties that harass you are superfluous. You can rid yourself of them by expanding into a wider universe." This isn't about dismissing your feelings, it's about anchoring them in something steadier than fleeting emotions. Think of a mountain storm's rage at its base, but the summit stays clear. The higher your perspective, the less turbulent life's rejections appear. So next time you're drowning in disappointment, come up for air, look at the stars. Breathe and remember, you're not just this moment, you're the whole sky. What if everything you've been taught about success is wrong? That's the radical question at the heart of the 10th Stoic strategy, defining success not by society's ever-shifting metrics, but by something unshakable, your own virtue. While the world chases promotions, likes, and possessions, the Stoics measured success by 4 pillars: wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. Imagine a life where rejection can't derail you, because your worth isn't tied to external validation. That's the freedom Seneca pointed to when he wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." Consider the story of John, a corporate lawyer who spent years climbing the ladder only to be passed over for partner. The rejection crushed him until it didn't. In the months that followed, he realized he'd been chasing a version of success that wasn't his. The late nights, the stress, the sacrifice of relationships, it all felt hollow. So he walked away. Today, he teaches wilderness survival skills, earning far less money but waking up every morning with something no title could give him: alignment. "I thought losing that promotion was the end," he says, "but it was the beginning of remembering who I was." That's Stoic wisdom in action. When you anchor your worth in character rather than status, rejection becomes a course correction, not a catastrophe. The Stoics drew a sharp line between preferred indifference, things like wealth or reputation that are nice to have but not essential, and virtue, the only true good. Epictetus, who lived with just a clay lamp and a rough cloak after gaining freedom from slavery, put it bluntly, wealth consists not in having great possessions but in having few wants. This isn't about rejecting ambition, it's about clarifying what you're truly ambitious for. Is it to impress others or to live with integrity, to collect accolades or to cultivate wisdom? Try this reframe the next time rejection makes you question your path. Write down your personal definition of success, not the resume-friendly version, but the one that would make your 8-year-old self proud. Maybe it's creativity over cubicles, curiosity over certainty, courage over comfort. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet his journal reveals a man more concerned with self-mastery than conquest. The only wealth you will keep is the wealth you have given away. Here's the liberating truth. When success is about who you become rather than what you achieve, no one can reject you from it. That project that failed. It taught you resilience, that relationship that ended. It deepened your capacity for love. Even the harshest no becomes raw material for growth. So ask yourself, if no one was watching, no one judging, what would success look like then? The answer might just redefine everything. Death might seem like an odd comfort in facing rejection until you meet the 11th Stoic strategy. The ancient practice of Memento Mori, Latin for remember you must die, isn't about morbidity, it's about liberation. Seneca, who wrote letters to his friend Lucilius while facing exile and political turmoil, put it plainly, let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing, let us balance life's books every day. What does this have to do with rejection? Everything. When you truly grasp how brief and precious your time is, the sting of a missed opportunity or a closed door softens into perspective. Imagine holding a handful of sand. Each grain represents a day of your life. Now picture pouring it slowly back onto the beach. That's time slipping through your fingers. The Stoics used this visualization not to incite fear, but to ignite urgency. That job application rejected, it's one grain, the romance that didn't last. A few more, the question shifts from why me to what will I do with the sand still in my hand. Seneca's letters hammer this point. You live as if you were destined to live forever. No thought of your frailty ever enters your head. How much time has passed unnoticed? Here's a ritual to bring this home. Every Sunday evening, set a timer for 5 minutes and write down 3 things. First, what did I treat as permanent this week that wasn't? Maybe you agonized over a critique that won't matter in a month. Second, what did I delay because I assumed there'd always be time? Perhaps reaching out to a mentor or starting that creative project. Third, if this were my last week, would I have spent it this way? No guilt, just clarity. This practice isn't about overhauling your life overnight. It's about small, steady realignments toward what truly matters. Consider the story of a musician who spent years auditioning for prestigious orchestras, facing rejection after rejection. Then her father fell ill. Sitting by his hospital bed, she realized she'd been chasing validation, not joy. Within a year, she'd formed an indie band playing subway stations and small clubs, not a backup plan, she says, but a wake-up call. Their raw, unconventional sound now draws crowds precisely because it's unpolished and real. Memento Mori didn't make her quit, it made her question why she was playing at all. Marcus Aurelius kept a skull on his desk not as a grim trophy, but as a daily whisper. This could be your last conversation. Your last decision, your last chance to choose kindness over pride. The modern equivalent might be a screensaver with the date of your actuarial life expectancy -1 year, or a monthly visit to an elderly relative's home. The goal isn't to dwell on death, but to dissolve the illusions that magnify rejection. So here's the challenge. The next time you face a no, ask yourself, if I had 6 months left to live, would this rejection change how I spend tomorrow? Not as a hypothetical, but as a gut check. You might find yourself reaching for the phone to call an old friend, or finally publishing that essay you've been perfecting for years. Because when time is your most finite currency, every rejection becomes a nudge to spend it more boldly. As Seneca wrote, life is long if you know how to use it. And sometimes it takes remembering it won't last forever to start using it well. What if the pain of rejection isn't about the loss itself, but about who was watching when it happened? That's the core of the 12th Stoic strategy, limiting social comparison. The ancient Stoics lived in a world without Instagram or LinkedIn, but they understood something timeless. The more you measure yourself against others, the more power you hand them over your peace. Epictetus, who taught students from all walks of life, put it bluntly, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. In other words, stop performing for an audience that doesn't hold your values and start living by your own compass. Think about how often rejection hurts not because the opportunity was right for you, but because someone else got it instead. The promotion that went to a colleague. The relationship your ex moved into faster than you did. Even the likes on a post that didn't get the same traction as a peer's. Social media has turned life into a highlight reel where everyone else's wins play on loop, while our struggles stay behind the scene. The Stoics would argue this is emotional sabotage. When you constantly compare your behind the scenes to someone else's curated highlight reel, you're setting yourself up to feel perpetually behind. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal reminder that cuts to the heart of this. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. Let that sink in. We'll sacrifice our sleep for a project to impress people we don't respect, while ignoring our own exhaustion. We'll twist ourselves into knots to meet standards we didn't choose, then wonder why rejection feels personal. The antidote: internal benchmarks. Ask yourself, am I better today than I was yesterday? Not richer, not more admired, just wiser, kinder, more aligned. Here's a challenge inspired by Seneca's letters. For 1 week, unfollow or mute every account, personal or professional. That triggers more envy than inspiration. That doesn't mean avoiding successful people. It means curating your mental space as carefully as your home. Would you invite someone into your living room who constantly made you feel inadequate? Social media is no different. Replace comparison with content that fuels your growth. Historians putting today's struggles in context, mentors sharing honest journeys, even nature accounts that remind you of life's scale beyond human drama. Consider the story of a young entrepreneur who spent years obsessing over a rival startup's funding rounds and press coverage. When her own venture failed, the sting wasn't just about the loss, it was about feeling lapped. Then she deleted her industry news apps and started tracking a different metric: how many problems she solved for real customers. Turns out, she says, I was running a race nobody had actually defined. Within a year, her pivot, smaller, quieter, but deeply impactful, caught the attention of investors who valued substance over hype. The Stoic practice here is simple but radical. Define your own finish line. When rejection comes, ask not why them and not me, but was this ever my race to run? Epictetus offered a litmus test. If someone told you that a stranger was speaking ill of you, would you care? Then why care if they speak well? Your worth isn't a ranking, it's a daily practice. So the next time you're tempted to scroll and compare, pause, close your eyes, and ask, what would I pursue if nobody were keeping score? the answer might just lead you home. There's a quiet power in responding to rejection, not with bitterness but with kindness, and that's the heart of the 13th Stoic strategy. Justice was one of the 4 cardinal virtues in Stoic philosophy, but it wasn't just about fairness in the abstract. It was about how you treated people, especially when they'd hurt or dismissed you. Think of Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, emerging not with vengeance but with a commitment to reconciliation. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies, he once said. The Stoics would have nodded in agreement. Marcus Aurelius put it even more plainly: the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Here's the radical idea beneath this: every interaction, even rejection, is an opportunity to define who you are. When someone says no, whether it's an employer, a partner, or a stranger, you have a choice. You can mirror their energy or you can rise above it. Gandhi, who faced constant rejection from British authorities, didn't meet their cruelty with more cruelty. He met it with relentless, disciplined compassion. That wasn't weakness, it was a strategic recalibration of power. By refusing to play by the rules of pettiness, he forced the world to confront its own injustice. Stoic justice works the same way. It's not about letting others off the hook. It's about refusing to let their actions dictate your character. Consider a modern example. A writer receives a scathing rejection letter from an editor, laced with unnecessary harshness. The easy response, a fiery email, or worse, internalizing the critique as truth. The Stoic response, a brief, polite thank you for their time, maybe even a note wishing them well, then moving forward with quiet determination. This isn't performative niceness, it's a reclaiming of agency. As Epictetus taught, when someone treats you poorly, they're the one diminished, not you, unless you choose to join them in that smallness. Try this reframe the next time rejection tempts you toward resentment. Ask yourself, what would the version of me I admire do here? Not the reactive, wounded version, but the one who's anchored in principle. Maybe it's sending a gracious LinkedIn message to the hiring manager who passed you over, leaving the door open for future opportunities. Maybe it's speaking well of an ex who didn't deserve it, not for their sake, but because gossip stains the soul. Seneca wrote, "A great mind becomes a great fortune by making a fortune of itself." In other words, true wealth is the ability to act with integrity, regardless of circumstance. Here's the paradox: kindness after rejection often disarms the other person far more than anger ever could. Think of the colleague who takes being overlooked for a promotion in stride, then offers genuine help to the person who got the role. That's not surrender, it's strength wearing a different face. Marcus Aurelius, who faced constant political betrayals, reminded himself, the offender needs your help more than you need his punishment. So here's a challenge. The next time someone rejects or dismisses you, pause, breathe, and ask, how can I act in a way that leaves me proud when I look back on this moment? Not for their sake, for yours, because in the end, the Stoics knew what modern psychology confirms. How you treat others says less about them and everything about you. And no rejection can take that from you unless you let it. Imagine being booed off stage not just once but routinely, only to respond by bowing deeply and thanking the audience for their honesty. That's exactly what the Stoic philosopher Diogenes did when hecklers mocked him. He'd laugh along with them, sometimes even adding his own jokes at his expense. This wasn't self-deprecation, it was psychological jujitsu. By refusing to take insults seriously, he robbed them of their power. Seneca, who faced his share of political slander, called this the art of turning poison into wine. He wrote, "The fool, with all his other faults, has this also. He is always getting ready to live." In other words, those who take every slight personally are postponing their own happiness. Humor doesn't trivialize pain, it reframes it. Think of a modern comedian bombing on stage, the worst response crumbling into tears, the most liberating. Owning the moment, well folks, that's my time and apparently yours too. Suddenly, the tension breaks. The audience isn't laughing at them but with them. The Stoics understood this alchemy. When you can laugh at life's rejections, you reveal their true size, smaller than they seemed in the dark corners of your mind. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled during plagues and wars, still found space in his journal to marvel at human absurdity. Alexander the Great and his mule driver both died, the same end. Perspective delivered with a wink. Here's a playful exercise inspired by Seneca's letters. Create a rejection resume. Instead of listing achievements, document every no you've ever received. The job you didn't get, the dates that ghosted, the ideas that flopped. Add humorous commentary like most creative misunderstanding of my talents award or voted least likely to impress this committee. The act does three things. First, it normalizes rejection as part of every journey. Second, it forces you to confront how many past catastrophes you've not only survived but outgrown. Third, and most importantly, it lets you reclaim the narrative. As Epictetus observed, it's not what happens to you, but how you tell yourself the story of what happened. History brims with figures who wore humor as armor. Abraham Lincoln, who faced relentless political defeats, once replied to a critic, "If I were two-faced, would I be wearing this one?" The Stoics would have applauded. Like a reed that bends in the wind but doesn't break, laughter makes you flexible in the face of life's blows. Seneca noted that anger is temporary madness, but so is taking every rejection as a verdict on your worth. Try this the next time rejection stings. Exaggerate it to absurdity in your mind. Picture the rejection letter written in crayon by a frowning toddler. Imagine the hiring committee as grumpy cats in suits. By stretching the scenario to its illogical extreme, you expose its fleeting importance. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the universe is change, life is opinion. And sometimes the best opinion to have about rejection is that it's downright ridiculous. So go ahead, laugh at the no's, not because they don't matter, but because you refuse to let them matter too much. Imagine training for years to compete in the Olympics, every pre-dawn run, every aching muscle, every sacrificed weekend. Then imagine crossing the finish line last. Most of us would call that failure, but the Stoics would ask a different question. Did you run your race with everything you had? That's the essence of the 15th strategy, focusing not on the medal but on the miles. The outcome isn't yours to control, the effort is. Epictetus, who trained students in the art of living just as coaches train athletes, put it plainly: first say what you'd be, then do what you must. Notice the order. You don't wait for results to define you. You let your actions define the results. Consider the story of a young violinist who auditioned for a world-renowned orchestra. She practiced 6 hours a day for months, visualizing every note. When the rejection letter arrived, her first reaction was devastation. Then she asked herself the Stoic question: did I prepare as thoroughly as possible? The answer was yes, she'd left nothing undone. That realization didn't erase the disappointment, but it transformed its meaning. The rejection wasn't proof of inadequacy. It was simply the outcome of a process she'd undertaken with integrity. 2 years later, she won a seat in an even better ensemble. The first audition taught me to fall in love with practice, she says, not applause. Here's where the Stoic approach diverges from modern hustle culture. Society glorifies results, viral posts, closed deals, shiny trophies, but the Stoics measured success by something far more reliable: the quality of your effort. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome during constant crises, wrote in his journal, "The reward for your actions lies in having done them, not in praise, not in promotions, in the doing itself." Picture a carpenter sanding a table leg long after the client has left the workshop. No one will notice those extra strokes, but he knows. That's Stoic excellence, pride in work, invisible to everyone but you. Try this shift the next time you face rejection. Instead of asking, "Why didn't I succeed?" ask, "Did I show up fully?" List the ways you prepared, the skills you honed, the fears you faced. If the answer satisfies you, the outcome becomes secondary. If it doesn't, you've found your starting point for growth. Epictetus offered a litmus test. If you didn't get the result you wanted, but you acted with courage and wisdom, you've actually succeeded by Stoic standards. Think of a novelist whose manuscript gets rejected by 20 publishers. She could fixate on the no's, or she could focus on what she controls, writing a stronger draft, studying the craft, persisting. The latter path aligns with Seneca's advice. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Preparation is your domain, luck is life's. This philosophy shines in sports. A basketball player can't control whether the final shot swishes through the net, but she can control her footwork, her follow-through, her hours in the gym. The Stoics would argue that's where true victory lies. As the coach John Wooden famously said, "Success is peace of mind attained only through self-satisfaction, in knowing you made the effort to do your best." That's pure Stoicism 2,000 years later. So here's the challenge. For 1 week, keep a process journal. Each evening, note not what you achieved, but how you engaged, the focus you brought to a meeting, the patience you practiced with a difficult task, the extra 10 minutes you spent refining your work. Over time, you'll notice something profound. Outcomes fluctuate, but integrity compounds, and no rejection can take that from you. Even the most dedicated Stoic wasn't meant to walk the path alone, which brings us to the 16th strategy, building a support network rooted in wisdom. Picture the ancient Stoa Poikile, the painted porch where Zeno first taught Stoicism, bustling with students debating ideas and sharpening each other's thinking. Now fast forward to today, where so many of us face rejection in silence, scrolling through setbacks alone in the glow of a screen. The Stoics would argue we've lost something vital, the friction and warmth of a community that challenges and uplifts us. Marcus Aurelius, despite his imperial power, began his meditations by listing everyone who shaped him, from his grandfather's patience to his philosophy teacher's stern lessons. From Rusticus he wrote, "I learned to read carefully and not be satisfied with superficial understanding." Imagine starting each day with that level of gratitude for your teachers. This isn't about surrounding yourself with yes men. A true Stoic network consists of people who hold you accountable, not just those who offer sympathy. Think of Seneca's letters to Lucilius, a master probing his students' thinking, not coddling his ego. Today, that might look like a mentor who asks tough questions after a job rejection. Did you truly prepare thoroughly, or are you blaming luck? Or a study group that dissects Stoic texts not as abstract philosophy, but as survival manuals for modern struggles. The goal isn't to avoid pain, but to have companions who remind you why the pain matters. Here's the practical side. Seek out 3 types of voices, those slightly ahead of you offering guidance, those beside you sharing the journey, and those you teach solidifying your own understanding. Online forums, local philosophy meetups, even a WhatsApp group where members share daily Stoic reflections, all can become modern versions of the Stoa. Epictetus, who taught in a crowded classroom despite his physical disabilities, knew this truth: we sink or swim together. Isolation magnifies rejection. Community reframes it as feedback. Consider the story of a startup founder who faced repeated investor rejections. Alone, each no felt like a verdict on his worth. Then he joined a founders' circle where members shared their most brutal rejections along with the unexpected opportunities that followed. Hearing someone else's worst-case scenario become their breakthrough changed everything, he says. It didn't make rejection fun, but it made it feel temporary. That's the alchemy of a Stoic network, turning individual stumbles into collective wisdom. So here's an invitation. Tonight, take a page from Marcus Aurelius' gratitude practice. Write down 3 people who have helped you grow through hard times, a professor who pushed you, a friend who listened without pity, even an author whose words resonated. Then reach out to one, not to ask for anything, but simply to say, your example mattered, because the Stoics knew a secret modern life often forgets. Rejection stings less when someone's there to remind you it's just another step in the arc of a life well lived. There's a moment after rejection when the story you tell yourself becomes everything. Will you frame it as something done to you, or as an event you moved through? That's the crux of the 17th Stoic strategy, rejecting victimhood and embracing radical accountability. Picture James Stockdale, the Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam and imprisoned for 7 years in the infamous Hanoi Hilton. Beaten, starved, and isolated, he could have collapsed into despair. Instead, he turned to Epictetus' teachings, scribbling Stoic principles on scraps of paper to share with fellow prisoners. His mantra, "I am not a victim of circumstance, I am the architect of my response." That shift in narrative didn't change the barbed wire or torture, but it transformed how he experienced them. Here's the Stoic truth: rejection only becomes a prison if you hand it the keys. Epictetus, born into slavery, knew this intimately. He taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you respond that defines you. Notice the emphasis on response, not event. When your partner walks away, when the promotion goes to someone else, when the critic dismisses your work, those moments are neutral until you assign them meaning. Victimhood says, "This broke me." Accountability asks, "How will this build me?" Consider the modern phenomenon of ghosting, when someone vanishes from your life without explanation. The easy narrative, "They're cruel, I'm unlovable." The Stoic rewrite, "Their silence reveals their character, not mine. My worth isn't negotiable by someone else's absence." This isn't about denying pain. It's about refusing to let pain dictate your identity. Marcus Aurelius faced constant political betrayals, yet his journal reveals a man more focused on his own integrity than others' treachery. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Try this exercise. Pick a past rejection that still stings. Now, rewrite it from 3 perspectives. First, as a victim, they ruined everything. Second, as a learner, this taught me. Third, as an alchemist, this freed me to notice how the facts don't change, but your power within them does. Stockdale didn't deny the horror of his prison cell. He denied it the right to define his spirit. When his captors told him he'd never see his family again, he whispered to himself, "They control the locks, not my thoughts." Here's the challenge. Next time you're rejected, pause before venting to friends or spiraling in self-blame. Ask Stockdale's question, "What's my dominion here?" Maybe it's choosing dignity over desperation. Maybe it's using the anger to fuel your next creative project. Or maybe it's simply deciding not to let someone else's no become your inner monologue. As Epictetus reminded his students, you're not a puppet jerked by external strings. You're the hand that pulls your own. So tell me, what story will you write with the next rejection life hands you? One of surrender or one of sovereignty? The 18th Stoic strategy might seem paradoxical at first, finding gratitude in the middle of rejection. But this isn't about slapping on a fake smile or pretending disappointment doesn't exist. It's about anchoring yourself to something deeper than the temporary sting of a no. The Stoics called this Eucharistos, the practice of recognizing abundance even in lack. Picture Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, writing to his friend Lucilius, "No one is poor who can afford to give." That's the essence of Stoic gratitude. It's not about what you've lost, it's about what you still possess and how generously you can share it. Modern science backs this ancient wisdom. Studies at the University of California and elsewhere show that people who keep gratitude journals experience measurable benefits: less anxiety, stronger relationships, even better sleep. One study had participants write down 3 things they were grateful for each day. After just 2 weeks, they reported significantly higher levels of optimism, not because their circumstances changed, but because their focus did. The Stoics would nod knowingly, as Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." Notice he didn't say, "If everything goes your way today." The privilege exists regardless of outcomes. Here's how to apply this when rejection hits. First, pause and name 3 things that remain untouched by this setback. Maybe it's your health, a friend who listens without judgment, or even the simple pleasure of a morning coffee ritual. This isn't about minimizing pain, it's about widening perspective. Think of a musician who loses a major gig but still has her hands to play, her ears to hear, and a small circle of fans who truly get her art. The rejection stings, but it doesn't erase everything. Try this nightly ritual inspired by Seneca's letters. Before bed, list 3 specific moments from the day, not grand achievements, but small, easily overlooked gifts. The smell of rain on pavement, a stranger's smile, the way sunlight fell across your desk in the afternoon. Over time, you'll train your mind to spot light even in darkness. Epictetus, who owned nothing but a wooden bowl until he saw a child drinking from cupped hands and threw even that away, taught, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." Consider the story of a writer who received 30 rejections for his novel. Each time, he added an entry to his gratitude ledger, notes like today, "I got to write for 2 uninterrupted hours, or my partner believed in this story even before I did." When the 31st publisher said yes, he realized the rejections hadn't just tested his persistence, they deepened his appreciation for the creative process itself. "I started writing for the joy of it again," he says. "That was the real win. Gratitude in the face of rejection isn't denial, it's defiance. It's whispering, I still have so much when the world shouts you lost this one." Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, plague, and war, yet his journal brims with reminders like the universe is change, life is perspective. So tonight, when the weight of a no feels heavy, pick up your pen. List 3 things that remain. You might just find that rejection didn't take nearly as much as you thought. Perfectionism doesn't demand excellence, it paralyzes it. That's the heart of the 19th Stoic strategy, embracing imperfection as the raw material of growth. Picture a river carving a canyon. Does it fret over every uneven curve? No, it flows, adapts, and in its persistent movement creates something magnificent. Marcus Aurelius captured this beautifully when he wrote, "The universe loves to create, even if that means cracks in the pottery or knots in the wood." The Stoics saw nature not as a flawless architect, but as an artist who finds beauty in the process itself. Your rejections aren't proof of failure, they're evidence that you're daring to shape something real. Consider the Japanese practice of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold lacquer. The flaws aren't hidden, they're illuminated. There's profound Stoic wisdom in that. Every cracked relationship, every rejected proposal, every stumbling attempt carries the potential to become stronger at the broken places. Seneca, who faced exile and political turmoil, wrote, "No tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless many winds assail it." The storms don't weaken the trunk, they teach it where to grow thicker. Here's where perfectionism betrays us. It whispers that unless conditions are ideal, you shouldn't begin, or worse, that unless you achieve flawless results, your effort was wasted. The Stoics would call this a rebellion against reality. Nature doesn't wait for perfect soil to sprout a seed. Stars don't refuse to shine because their light takes years to reach our eyes. Epictetus, who walked with a limp from childhood slavery, put it bluntly: first say what you would be, then do what you must, not do what feels safe or do what guarantees applause. Think of a novelist paralyzed by the fear of a bad first draft. Months pass with a blank page. Then she remembers Marcus Aurelius' reminder: the obstacle is the way. So she writes one imperfect sentence, then another. The draft is messy, but it exists, and that's the only way it can ever become better. As author Anne Lamott says, perfectionism is the voice of the oppressor. The Stoics would agree: your pursuit of flawlessness isn't noble, it's a cage. Try this today. Choose one small, imperfect action. Send that email draft without over-editing. Have that difficult conversation without rehearsing every possible outcome. Plant seeds in less than ideal soil. Then ask yourself, what if my imperfections aren't roadblocks but the very texture of my growth? The sculptor's chisel doesn't create masterpieces by avoiding the marble, it strikes it again and again, trusting that each chip reveals something truer. Your rejections, your stumbles, your so-called flaws, they're the chisel, and you're both the sculptor and the stone. Imagine standing at a crossroads where every rejection feels like a detour until you remember the destination you chose long before the roadblocks appeared. That's the essence of the 20th and final Stoic strategy, anchoring yourself to your telos, your fundamental purpose. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that those who retained a sense of purpose endured unimaginable suffering with dignity. His words echo the Stoic truth: when you know why you're here, no can derail you for long. Epictetus put it plainly: first say who you'd be, then do what you must. Notice the order: purpose comes before action, not the other way around. Think of a sailor navigating stormy seas. The waves might force her off course momentarily, but the North Star remains fixed. Your purpose is that star. Every rejection, whether a lost job, a failed relationship, or a creative project dismissed, becomes a question: does this shake my core purpose or merely my preferred path? A teacher rejected from a prestigious school still educates. An artist denied gallery space still creates. The venue changes, the calling doesn't. Marcus Aurelius, who faced constant political upheaval, wrote in his journal, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's telos in action, living your answer rather than seeking permission. Frankl's logotherapy, born from his camp experiences, mirrors Stoic principles. Prisoners who clung to a future purpose, reuniting with family, finishing a book, sharing their story, often outlived those who lost hope. Similarly, Stoicism teaches that meaning isn't found in avoiding rejection, but in transcending it through purposeful action. Consider the modern entrepreneur whose startup collapses. If her purpose was merely wealth, the failure devastates. But if her deeper aim was solving a problem or serving a community, the setback becomes a pivot, not an end. Here's a practical exercise. Write your personal telos in 10 words or fewer. Not a job title or achievement, but the essence of how you want to show up in the world, to create beauty in chaos or to empower others through clarity. Keep it somewhere visible. When rejection strikes, hold it up like a lantern. Ask, does this no change my purpose or just my plan? Epictetus warned, if you don't know which port you're sailing to, no wind is favorable. But when you know your port, even headwinds can teach you to tack smarter. History's most resilient figures shared this trait. Nelson Mandela's purpose wasn't to avoid prison, it was to liberate a nation. Every rejection letter Stephen King received before Carrie wasn't a verdict on his writing. It was friction polishing his voice. The Stoics would argue that your rejections aren't obstacles to your purpose, they're part of its unfolding. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." So tonight, before sleep, ask yourself, if all external validations vanished, titles, applause, even recognition, who would I still choose to be? The answer is your compass, and no rejection can steal it unless you hand it over. As Frankl observed, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Your purpose isn't just what you do, it's the light you become, regardless of how often life tries to blow it out. So there you have it, 20 Stoic strategies to face rejection not as a verdict, but as fuel. From the dichotomy of control to anchoring in your purpose, each tool is a step toward unshakable resilience. But here's the truth no one tells you. Rejection isn't a malfunction of life, it's part of the operating system. Every no you've ever heard has also been heard by the person you admire. The difference is how they kept walking. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, Seneca endured exile, Epictetus rose from slavery, yet their legacies outlasted empires because they understood one thing: your worth isn't negotiable by external forces. Think of these strategies as a mental armor forged over centuries. Some, like journaling or voluntary discomfort, are daily habits. Others, like cosmic perspective or humor, are lenses to snap onto life's hardest moments. But armor isn't meant to gather dust, it's meant to be worn. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one strategy this week, just one. Maybe it's pausing to ask, what can I control? After a setback, or writing a rejection resume to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Small steps build unbreakable resilience. Seneca, who knew a thing or two about life's trials, left us this reminder: difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Every rejection you face is another rep in your mental gym, and if you've made it this far, you're stronger than you think. So the next time life says no, remember, you're holding 20 ways to say yes to yourself. If this resonated with you, hit subscribe. We're just scratching the surface of Stoic wisdom. Now go forth, stumble, rise, and repeat. The world needs people who know how to fall and how to stand taller.